If you have questions or suggestions for future podcasts, please submit them in the comment section below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Growing or dying? Hi, I'm Dave Arnott, the Christian Economist. You know, it's all about power. The serpent told Eve if she ate the apple, she would be God. Things have not changed that much. People still want to be God, and they attempt to become God by having power over others. Now, in a previous generation, the political term was communism that used the economic concept of socialism. Today, they're calling it the Great Reset. It's the title of my podcast number 112, actually. Now, their long-term plan is to cause so much chaos that we will beg them to take over. I asked Ginger recently, why would George Soros donate money to defund the police in Austin, Texas? Answer, when chaos breaks out, we cede more power to the government to quell the violence. Now, harking back to my days in management, I used to tell groups, look, they call it an organization because it's a growing thing. Like your skin, which is shedding cells as we're sitting here, the organization is an organ. It's either growing or dying. There is no stable state. You know, economies are the same way. Yet, we as humans want a stable state. Sorry, not on this side of heaven. Your organization is either growing or dying. Your business is growing or dying. Your church is growing or dying. Your marriage is growing or dying. The economy is growing or dying. Now, in the economics textbook I use at Dallas Baptist University, the author Gregory Mankiw states it very clearly. Policies are either there to cause efficiency when society getting the maximum benefits from its scarce resources. This is called growing the size of the pie. Or policies seek equality, where there's a distribution of economic prosperity uniformly among the members of society. These policies are concerned with how the pie is divided into individual slices. Everything involving redistribution is no growth because it steals productive capital and assets and power to give it to someone else. This violates the 8th commandment, don't steal. I boldly announced in my class at Dallas Baptist University, each policy can be put into only one category, meaning the policy either grows the pie or divides the pie. My students are watching one of the clearest examples of both just in their young lives, in back-to-back presidential administrations. Trumponomics grew the pie. Bidenomics is distributing the pie. The degrowth craze. Andy Kessler, writing in the Wall Street Journal recently, calls it the deadly degrowth craze. Subtitle, stagnant societies eventually slide into oppression, chaos, anarchy, and ruin. Quote, the modern world is constantly subjected to crackpot movements that eventually fail, but not before causing serious damage. Karl Marx was a crackpot, he writes. The latest is modern monetary theory and unlimited dollar creation for government spending, which caused today's runaway inflation, end quote from Mr. Kessler. I explain in greater details the foolishness of modern monetary theory in my podcast number 31 titled The Myth of Modern Monetary Theory. But for today, I'll summarize it by emphasizing it is a myth. You can change economic policy, you can't change economic law. Modern monetary theory attempts to change economic law, and thus it fails miserably. Now, Mr. Kessler in his Wall Street Journal article reports that the no-growth crowd demands that we put well-being ahead of profit. Now, hold it. Let's take a peek behind the curtain of these great Oz pretenders. They're assuming that profit does not produce well-being. Profit is well-being because it creates more jobs instead of government honeypots to pay people not to work. Growth is fuel. See that computer you're watching this podcast on? They're trying to tell you that's not well-being. Neither, they say, is any prescription drug you took this morning or that very safe car you're driving that gets 35 miles to the gallon, nor the internet that transmitted your church service during the pandemic. According to them, none of those are considered well-being. Right? What is considered well-being? Being poor. That's their definition of well-being. The World Economic Forum contains a video asking, what would a post-economic growth world look like? Yeah, I'll save you the pain of looking at the WEF website. It would look like a world without those things I just mentioned: computers, modern pharmaceuticals, efficient cars, and the internet. Those are all relatively new developments produced by a world that relied on efficiency as defined by Mr. Mankiw and growth as defined by Andy Kessler. Living with less. Okay, this idiotic degrowth movement would eventually devolve into chaotic food riots and nighttime raids of drugstores. That looks familiar in California and other democratically run cities today. Maybe the devious plan of Mr. Soros is working. See, that's what happened in the Roman Empire, in the Soviet Union, in Cuba, and Venezuela. Degrowth leads to scarcity, then to command and control. They've tried this with healthcare and education. As mentioned earlier, they're now working on the police departments. Winston Churchill famously said, "You don't make the poor richer by making the rich poorer." And the Dave Arnott extension is as follows: making the rich poorer makes the poor poorer. The Christian Worldview. Now, the Christian Worldview says we should live relatively simple lives. Sometimes Christians have purposely done that. But please note the operative verb, purposely. They made the choice to be poor. What we're experiencing today from the Davos crowd is virtue signaling experts who claim they are better than us, telling us that it's better for us to be poor. Okay, if you know the New Testament, you're probably thinking about a scripture that actually a podcast viewer posted on my YouTube channel recently. He said, "If you want to be perfect, go sell your possessions and give to the poor, and you will have treasure in heaven. Then come follow me." That's from Matthew 19:21. Okay, I was tempted to ask whose computer he was typing on. Okay, all right, just some brief theology here. That message from Jesus was to that specific man, because although money is not the root of all evil, the love of money is. And it was the view of Jesus that this man could only find peace and salvation by giving away everything. Now, if God has called you to do that, go ahead and may God bless you. But what we're missing here, and socialists always miss this, is the exercise of power. The Davos crowd at the World Economic Forum is saying it's better for them to make decisions for you. Now, even Jesus, who we believe was God, didn't take away the man's goods. He told him to make the choice. You see, when you have a choice, people choose to flee socialist systems and escape to free market capitalist societies, as they're now doing in Venezuela and as they've done for years in Cuba. Interesting. I don't know of any stories of people actually choosing to immigrate to Cuba, but that's what the degrowth group is trying to do. Instead of forcing you to move to Cuba, they're trying to bring Cuba to you. Don't let them. Who could be against raising living standards and reducing poverty? Central planners, that's who. The no-growth crowd would rather shuffle stuff around. See, that's their exercise of power, just like Eve. Except government. Now, interesting that the no-growth crowd wants you to have less of everything except government control. They're all for a larger government. And the IRS just got the money to hire 87,000 new agents. I explain the Christian worldview of that movement in my podcast number 140, titled "The IRS Targets the Proletariat." While lecturing in Moscow one cold March night in 1993, an MBA student asked me why more Western companies didn't invest in Russia. Now, I had just completed my dissertation on U.S.-Russian joint ventures, so I probably gave a very long, boring answer, which ended with a comment about the inability for Western firms to make long-term plans in the uncertain political environment of Russia. One of the students responded, "Oh, we used to have plans, 5-year plans." The entire class erupted into laughter that night in Moscow. That's because the 5-year plans never worked. Margaret Thatcher told Mikhail Gorbachev over and over, every chance she got, she said, "My job is easier than yours. My economy runs itself. I don't have to plan it." Central planning still does not work is the title of my podcast number 76. Capitalism is humanity's greatest invention. That statement by Whole Foods founder John Mackey is still ringing in my head. He might be right. Growth is how we take people out of poverty. In my lifetime, the world's share of the population who is living in extreme poverty has been reduced from 44% to just over 8%. That's just astounding. A vibrant, growing economy serves the poor more than the rich, and that's very clear. In their recent book, Superabundance, Marian Tupy and Gail Pooley point out that only about 2% of increased value is captured by these rich entrepreneurs like Steve Jobs, Bill Gates, and Jeff Bezos. That means the other 98% is spread among the poor by providing computers and internet service and products to their door that enriches their lives. I was having dinner with some DBU students last week, and a student from Colombia talked about his youth. He said, "Hey, everyone wanted to immigrate to Venezuela," he explained excitedly. Then he started ticking off the scarcity caused by socialism in that once great nation. There's inflation, food shortages, militarized police, all of the things that caused a third of the population to flee the once rich country. Oh, on a side note here, I purposely withdrew from the conversation so I could listen to his convincing argument to his very agreeable American counterpart. I'll tell you, if a Pew study shows that 65% of American college students would vote for a socialist, there were none at that table, or perhaps in the entire cafeteria. Okay, since I'm on side notes, I'm a professor and sometimes I profess. Another side note, this generation is not going to hell in a handbasket. I often advise people, if you get disheartened by bad news, just visit chapel at Dallas Baptist University. You'll be surrounded by 1,000 young people singing praises to God. You'll come away refreshed and confident, and you'll agree with me. This generation's going to be okay. Okay, back to my degrowth subject. Now, degrowth via socialism is being forced to live with less. Growth via free market capitalism is choosing to do more with less. I'm Dave Arnott, the Christian Economist. Fear God, tell the truth, earn a profit. See you next time. For more information, please visit us online at davearnott.com. If you have questions or suggestions for future podcasts, please submit them online or in the comment section below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.